The more I watercolor paint, the more I notice how lazy techniques help me improve, and in this video, I'm going to share my entire lazy process to paint this seemingly complex terrain reference here, and I'll show you how you can apply this to any other watercolor project. If you're intermediate, you'll be able to apply this advice right away in your paintings, and if you're a beginner and overwhelmed, I'm confident that this video will help you grasp what skillful paintings are made of and what to practice on to actually get there quicker. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a full-time artist and watercolor teacher, and outside of YouTube, you'll find today's painting in real time and voiceover on Patreon, or you can learn more realistic watercolor and watercolor pencil painting from me on Skillshare or through my website directly with beautiful landscape series. Back to painting our terrain, and first of all, look at this reference here. Pretty complex, isn't it? I'm no expert when it comes to terrains, but that does not matter to paint beautiful watercolors, and many of us miss the mark when we start learning. And that's because beautiful watercolors do not need to be perfect. It's actually quite the opposite. And that's where being lazy with this medium is going to serve you. For example, here there's no need to zoom in on the photo and get all the small parts in the terrain or try to replicate everything perfectly. And this goes for pretty much everything else you'll tackle, except maybe celebrity or family portraits for which you would need the best accuracy. And even then, you wouldn't need to sketch everything, just the main features. After roughly sketching the shape and the main parts, I started refining this a bit. Still, no need to spend too much time on a sketch because quick approximate sketches and messy lines are great to start any watercolor because they will help you paint all styles without ever making the art too tight, even when you're into realism and perfectionism like me. So basically just forget about straight lines and everything perfect. It will be hard at first if you like everything to be neat, but you will get used to it. And since many of us want to just get to painting and not spend ages sketching, I think this is perfect. And because even perfectionists have a certain degree of laziness within them, if that's you, please comment below. I'm so lazy. I think that'd be funny. And I'm lazy too, so no shame in that. It's actually a good thing with watercolor. Notice I take it easy and I do not try and use a ruler or anything like that. I bet I even skipped a bunch of details that only the train police will ever know about. But because each project is unique and the train itself will be a dark color, here I decided to press harder with my pencil so I don't lose the sketch under the first watercolor layer and have to work overtime by redoing the sketch later. As you paint, you'll make mistakes, you'll learn to make things easier for you, so that's the kind of shortcut that might not look like one at first, but it's actually going to save you a bunch of time later. Light colors, like in a snowy watercolor scene, will require light lines so they don't show in the end underneath the coat of paint. But dark colors can take darker sketches as long as we don't indent the paper. You also might want to do this gradually like me. Main shapes with light pencil strokes first to get your sketch on paper, and then press harder to refine. Once you know there won't be much erasing at all, it really helps keep the sheet clean and the sketch neat enough in the end, just ready for painting. A limited color palette is gonna be my favorite lazy technique because not only will that guarantee great color harmony without you having to lift a finger, it's just gonna happen naturally. The least colors you use, the more chances for color harmony. And then you will not have to spend time trying to decide what color to use here, what color to use there, and spending time navigating from one to the next. Everything's gonna be just more simple. That's why here I only selected 3 colors from my all-time favorite set for winter painting, the Schminke Tundra set. I selected their orange, pink, and violet colors. I decided that orange and pink were going to be the midtones. Violet is actually more like a dark gray in that set, so that would be the dark tone. And then the white of the paper would be the light tone. And that is really all you need, even with other mediums. And that's why you keep hearing all the time that using 3 to 5 colors is better. I used to find this super annoying when I first started painting because there are all these colors available on the market. I wanted to try them all, and I thought maybe one was going to be so much better than the other one, so I needed to try them all. And I have sets that are full of colors, but in fact nowadays I always use the same ones, and that is going to happen naturally as you get better with color mixing. You're also gonna have favorites in all your colors that you use, and you're gonna notice, most importantly, that it's much easier to stick to a limited palette. Notice I also decided to use the tubes directly, and that's because for a large size we're gonna need more paint, and since I'm lazy, I know that if I get it fresh out of the tube, it's going to be quicker for me to turn it into something that I can paint with, rather than fighting with trying to reactivate my dry half pans all the time. And that, I think, is also why a lot of artists that have been painting for years will use tubes rather than pans. And I like to make my paint mixes creamy like milk, neither too thick nor too watery. I start from there, and since this is the ideal between watery and thick, it becomes quick and easy to make the mix either lighter by adding more water or heavier by adding more paint. You see by now that quick and easy are two recurring words here. And of course that doesn't mean that the project itself is going to be quick and easy to paint. It just means that you want to simplify your painting process as much as possible, and this is completely doable with those lazy techniques. And we saw already that this happens with sketching, also with a limited palette. It also happens with the consistency of your paints. And the next one is the actual way to start a painting. And I'm referring to the wet and wet technique, because think about it. Why is it that most watercolor paintings, especially those with a background, start on wet? Because being lazy supports watercolor, and that's why when you want to quickly block in your main colors and just get started on your painting, get something going, the easiest way to do this is to paint on wet. And I know what you're thinking right now, especially if you're in the beginner stages. Wet and wet is frustrating for many of you. That is a skill that you'll learn to develop by doing. And also by selecting a good paper. And I always recommend 100% cotton watercolor papers, cold press, and 300 grams per square meter, because they retain more water and they give us more time to paint without seeing drying lines and stains forming. And believe me, as an experienced artist, I can tell you that paper makes a huge difference, because there's no miracles in watercolor painting. If everything dries very fast, it's gonna make the whole process way more challenging, and the outcome's gonna suffer a little bit from it. So all of us are equal in this. Mine here is the Beihong Master's Choice paper. I love it, just like the Arches paper. But still, it's important to pre-wet it very well. Take your time when you do this and make sure that the water sinks inside the fibers. So it's truly effective and really dries slowly, because if you wet it superficially on the surface really quickly, it's still gonna dry fast. Then feel free to add a bit of water to your creamy mixes if you need to start with lighter colors. This way, when you have no idea what you're doing and maybe you're terrified, it's still going to be good, because the process is gradual. Colors are going to be light to begin with, and nothing really can ruin your painting at this stage. The main thing to remember when you get started is to just block in the main colors briefly, and to try and work on the whole sheet at once, just so all of the paper stays wet at the same time and in the same manner. And then little by little, increase the amount of pigment in your mixes, even though they should always stay creamy at first. We keep them thicker for later stages only. And the goal here is to end up with a base that is pigmented enough that you won't have to do a bunch of layers after this. And the fact you're doing it on wet will help you get that looseness in your painting, no matter how much realism you want to add later, especially with something like this, such a blocky, almost boring shape like this train. Brush strokes are very important too in the process because they help give life to the painting. I'll usually either tap the brush on paper, like here for the steam effect, or I'll just make quick strokes, straight or curvy, depending on the kind of movement I need to suggest in the painting. When we have an initial base, it's going to be less work for us later, and this was fast. So remember then to dry the sheet very well, even if you mean to add a second layer on wet later. And for insight, maybe even extra encouragement, when I started painting with watercolors in the first, I'd say 2, even 3 years, I would paint my backgrounds in stages. I would do a base layer, then a second layer, then sometimes even a third layer. And that gave me the reassurance that I could stop each time, just dry everything and start over. Now I'm more used to painting on wet. I have mastered water control really well. So I'm able to do this in one sitting, which is great. And that really, again, comes with practice. This is not the technique that a lot of us will view as the most lazy one of all. It depends, just because painting on dry takes longer than painting on wet. But I'm going to show you how here with this trade, it was in fact a very lazy technique in the way that I did it. Notice that instead of tackling each section in detail, I just quickly covered the whole train shape with color. And it was fine because first of all, my sketching lines were dark enough. And second of all, I'm going to share some tricks later to show you how worrying about details at this stage is completely pointless. We can still create beautiful realism in the end. My focus at this stage of the process was to again block in the main colors, but also leverage water to make some of my colors appear lighter in places. This is quick and easy to do, and it makes for beautiful watercolors, because you get to see the transparency of the paint and also create realism by building contrast between light, mid, and dark tones and really adding a variety of colors from just a few colors. And that is because light, mid, and dark tones are not just achieved by picking colors that are light, dark, or anything in between. It is also achieved by adding more or less water to the paint itself. You can already notice what this does for a 3D effect, with some parts of the train here looking like they're forward more, and others looking like they're backwards. Also here with the planks on the ground, notice I'm fast and a bit careless as well, because this is most beautiful in a watercolor painting, to be a little bit careless at times, to suggest rather than outline perfectly. It's quicker and it's perfect for lazy painters. The least important the thing you're suggesting is in the overall painting, the lazier you can be about it. Because here, for example, the train will be the focus and the planks are just noise in the background that makes the painting look more complete and finished in the end. It sets the scene a little bit better where you understand that's a train on rails. I'm not sure they're called that way. So even though the planks themselves look unfinished and a little bit messy, it's going to add to the painting, and it's the full paradox of watercolors. And I think that's what is so hard to grasp at first for newcomers to the mediums. It's the way to start a painting from nothing and build on top of it with broken lines and whatnot, with that knowing that it will look great in the end. The way to balance loose and realistic in a painting has become my specialty, I believe. I think I've managed to master it really well over the years, being a perfectionist. And that is a skill that I've been teaching actively in all of my painting series that are available on my website. And I'll make sure to link them below if you want to take a look. Layering the lazy way, that's what I started doing here by refining the train itself without getting into too much detail yet. I was ready for some shadows. That's where a dark color comes in useful in your limited palette. And for me, remember, it was the Tundra Violet because it is so dark. So I started shaping the train. If I needed a part to pop against another one to look like it's closer to me, I just added a thick coat of violet right by it. But because I don't like a cartoonish look to my paintings, I just don't use one color or one consistency of paint in any area of my painting. Remember that variation is key. And that's why I kept working with my 3 colors, mostly pink and violet here. And I also played with consistency by adding sometimes more pigment and sometimes more water. This again builds up the contrast. You can really see it clearly here, and it's when something starts to look more and more realistic too. However, when you look at this, you can see that we're going somewhere, but it still looks clumsy in places, a bit off sometimes. And this is where my laziest technique of all comes in. But first, because I'm a perfectionist, whenever I can, I like to enhance shadows in places just a bit. And with this painting, I went with my dark violets again to do that. So first I fixed areas that seem crooked or not completely accurate. And here with this train painting, this probably was the least lazy of all parts in the process because adding deeper shadows requires more attention to detail and working with a smaller brush as well, and adding more care to the strokes. And even sometimes adding extra lines as detail to an area that looked bare and boring. But it's still lazy, however, because I'd already done a lot of the work here, and these parts that needed refinement were easy to spot. I even added lines in places that I wasn't even sure needed to be there, but it just looked good to do it on my painting. And honestly, as a perfectionist, I find this part meditative, and it's super exciting to see the painting come together and look better and better. And now the laziest and most fun techniques of all, the one that I've actually used a lot more this year. I love it. It's truly part of my process now, and I believe it's been taking my watercolors to the next level to do it that way. So remember, I left some whites in the sky and avoided some parts at the very bottom of the train. And these are great highlights already. They're pretty bright. Also notice that here, in the train specifically, we have dark tones that you just saw me add, and we have midtones, but we're not really seeing any light tones at all. And my go-to technique is to reactivate the paint where I need a highlight and lift it with a paper towel. This not only makes the most natural highlights, it is also quick. It is great to add a bunch of intricate detail on something complex like this train with the least effort. I love that it works so well whenever the highlights are subtle. If they're meant to be really bright, like a bunch of snow, let's say, then please just avoid that area altogether or use masking fluid or something like this. Here, however, this was absolutely perfect and it serves more than one purpose. Notice how the rounded parts in the center started looking so much better thanks to this technique, when before they looked a bit cartoonish. Also notice how here there are obvious details such as pipes that I had left out before. So I added them in seconds with this technique without ever drawing it first. This is the kind of quick detail that was missing to make this painting complete and beautiful in a lazy way. I also used lifting here to emphasize area I had already made sure to preserve and just make them look a bit better, and also reshape the parts on the ground better. And just like that, you can see how it's possible to take a painting from kind of messy and approximate to just gorgeous. I did the exact same thing to shape curls and add highlights into the hair of this elfic girl who is now posted in the front window of my art studio, and it was a lot of fun to do. It really changed everything from flat, boring strands to beautiful, intricate, curly locks. But wait for the cherry on top with the train because winter is near and Christmas as well, so a few snowflakes are always a treat. I do prefer white gouache for this. I think it works well in a painting like this one in particular because the train is dark. So the highlights on it are very subtle, and I knew that the gouache was just going to add a natural bright effect that was going to come balance the light sky by making this dark blocky train shape less intrusive. It really helped light it up in some way and also add magic into the painting itself. I knew this painting would turn amazing before I started because of the lazy process I've shared with you and that serves watercolor so well. So remember, you can learn my techniques along with me on Patreon, Skillshare, or with a masterclass on my website. And next, if you want to see how I tackle another winter painting, here's something that you might find inspiring. So thank you so much for watching and see you next time.